Welcome. We are the Ministry of the Real Truth. At this point in time, we feel a real need to once and forever, for all, prove that Jesus the Christ actually existed beyond the mere claims, well, it says so in the Bible, so it must be true, so that no one can any longer claim that he never existed, that Yeshua Missick or Jesus the Messiah never existed, because the evidence presented will be too overwhelming for one to continue to do so. This must be presented and verified as established fact. The evidence must prove itself evident beyond any doubt. So the information that we're about to present all must prove the writers of the original text, or the authors of those manuscripts, must be proven irrefutable and infallible in order for their writings to be deemed irrefutable or infallible. So we'll strive to present our evidence that we feel is proving itself as established fact. The evidence proves itself as evident, or 100% evident, and the authors or writers therefore are proven irrefutable, which deems the text or the manuscripts irrefutable and infallible. We'll strive to use logic and common sense, and also to stay within reality, because we know that someone or something created us human beings, bringing us into existence. Ultimately, it was either a deity, or God as we know it, or God as we call it, or an extraterrestrial conglomeration or confederation that created us and brought us into existence via DNA, genetic splicing, hybridization, etc. There must be solid evidence presented, proofs that we were created by A or B. It's one or the other. But we're open to C or D. We at the Ministry of the Real Truth will have to investigate both sides of this coin through personal research, etc., in order to bring all the real evidence. Putting the facts into order, if we can, as best as we can, in the proper and exact era's time frame, according to that ancient era time frame. In AD 70, the Roman Titus enters, or rather invades, Jerusalem, burns the temple, massacres and slaughters the temple priests, etc., and the people, and plunders the holy relics, carries them off. Survivors live on because they fled the scene, right? The church at Jerusalem, of which the original disciples of Yeshua Missick or Jesus the Messiah gathered, also fled. It has been said that someone amongst those disciples had written down as a witness what the Christ said and did, and another in this plight, in this predicament, when the church was being burned, etc., picked them up and fled the horrid scene and ran across land, etc., i.e. Thomas or Adai, and perhaps went through China thereafter, as a stele was found there, as attested by the native born Aramaic speaking translator Victor N. Alexander. Or he actually saw it, because remember on his website there may have been a photo of him looking at it, not really sure, or else he read about it online or something. This particular stele was found in an area of China, and it had Chinese on the top of it, and underneath it had Aramaic underneath it. So Victor N. Alexander apparently gathered that someone who both spoke and wrote Aramaic went through that area and later left a stele there. It has been stated by the Church of the East that Thomas founded the original Apostolic Church of the East, and he went to India around and founded 7 churches there before zealous Brahmins ran him through with swords, and he became martyred. Apparently, disciples went on to China and even Japan and preached the good news about Yeshua Missick, or Jesus the Christ. We will take a look at the Assyrian church and their history, as told by the head patriarchs, etc., of both the ancient past and those today, and the translator Victor Nimrod Alexander, of their said hidden, therefore preserved manuscripts. That was hidden from Constantine, Emperor Constantine, who wanted to destroy, was hell bent on destroying that church, i.e. the Roman Catholic Church, the Mohammedans, now Islam, etc. So these supposed hidden, therefore preserved manuscripts were hidden and preserved, so they were intact for over 2,000 years. They were never translated into any other foreign language, as the high priest knew the language, so read from it to the congregation or mass. They do that today. Who also speak the Aramaic, Syriac, etc. These high priests are reading from their liturgy. They never modified it or translated the original ancient, very old manuscripts into Greek, Hebrew, Latin, or Latin, Old Germanic, English, etc. It wasn't until Victor Alexander sought to translate the original Aramaic scriptures into English, where he was told by a high priest that he was translating from the wrong text, the Eastern Syriac Peshitta, and he bought a Bible format version of the hidden preserved manuscripts in the original Galilean Aramaic, etc., from this high priest of that church, the Church of the East, again, who informed that the Eastern Syriac is actually wrong. That he discovered many others who had translated the Aramaic had botched it. Okay, we're going to have a look at his actual translation and read from page 3 or 5 of that, and his statement in regards to the Bibles today. Okay, he states in his translation note, page 3, the Disciples' New Testament is a translation of the ancient Aramaic New Testament scriptures of the ancient Church of the East directly into English. The ancient Church of the East began in Jerusalem at the time of the disciples and apostles of Yeshua Missick, or Jesus the Messiah. The ancient Aramaic scriptures were compiled into one book in the middle of the 4th century AD by the scribes of that ancient Church of the East in the city of Urhai, later called Edessa. Urhai was in Asia Minor, today's Turkey. It had the first university in the world where scriptures, the sciences, medicine, mathematics, history and literature were taught. The idiomatic wording of the majority of the passages is in the text of the translation, and the literal wordings are given in footnotes. He always provides footnotes per book, per chapter, per verse in this Aramaic New Testament. And the literal wordings are given in footnotes. Sometimes the literal wording is left in the text. At such times the footnote indicates that the literal wording is retained, and the footnote gives the equivalent of the English language idiom or words. When there are no equivalent words in the English language for a word or phrase, the implied words are included in brackets or parentheses. When there are extra words in ancient Aramaic text that will sound redundant in English, the additional word or words are included in parentheses. Okay, there's brackets in these parentheses. This way none of the words in the original scriptures are left out. Footnotes appear at the bottom of each chapter as lit.rar.id. This stands for literal Aramaic idiom. It's the way they express themselves to bring it across to the reader. It's sort of to do with Eastern mindset, etc. So you need to learn the Eastern mindset, or adopt and then adapt Eastern mindset. When it comes to names of people, there's only one name that sounds the same both in English and the Aramaic language, and that name is Adam. All the other names in the Aramaic language sound different in English. Therefore, Victor Alexander has chosen to retain 3 names in the original. The first is the name of Joshua. Joshua is called Jesus in English. He felt that the name Joshua should be pronounced correctly, Yahshua. The second is the name of Allah. Allah is called God in English. There is no word in the Aramaic Hebrew language. There's no such word in the Aramaic Hebrew language. The third is the name of the Messiah from Missick, the Aramaic. Messiah is called Christ in English. Missick means the anointed one, or anointed. Messiah is an acceptable rendition of this word, while Christ comes from the Greek word for oil, and therefore the anointed in Greek. Since the New Testament was originated in the ancient Aramaic language and not in Greek, the word Christ is not used in this translation. Ancient Aramaic is a Western designation for that language that emerged out of Nineveh, capital Ashur, A-S-H-U-R, around 800 BC. This language is simply known by the Church of the East of today as Lishana Atika, ancient tongue. It was the first alphabetical language invented by the Ashurite people. There is a monument in the British Museum which has this language etched into it and marked as belonging to the period of 800 BC. The modern scholars of Judaism refer to this language today as Asherite. Yeshua preached, as Jesus the Messiah, preached and read the scriptures in this language. The ancient Aramaic is therefore the scribal language of the scriptures, and it is sacred. That's why we say the original ancient sacred scribal old tongue or language, and we're trying to differentiate between that original dead language that's been revived by 15 Alexander and these modern dialects or derivatives like Syriac, modern Hebrew or Israeli Hebrew, and possibly modern Greek and the Latinized form of Greek. Yeshua, or Jesus the Messiah, preached and read the scriptures in this language. The ancient Aramaic is therefore the scribal language of the scriptures, and it is sacred. It is still being used in the liturgy of many Eastern churches today, including the Church of the East of the Atorai, A-T-O-U-R-A-I, and the Orthodox Church of the Sourai, S-O-U-R-A-I, in India. It is, however, a liturgical language, which was not translated correctly until Victor N. Alexander found out about the fact that it has never been translated into any modern vernacular of any of the churches still using it. The American missionaries of the 19th century attempted to translate the scripture into modern Aramaic Syriac, but botched it. They messed it up, as they adapted it to the King James Version and used by them at the time. The Urmia, North Iran, version of the Bible is essentially the American Bible translated into modern Aramaic. He stresses here, by the way, the American missionaries have translated all the Bibles of all the countries of the world from the American Bible. That is why all the Bibles thus translated, the ones you got today, contain the same errors in translation and pseudo-Christian doctrines, half-truth or false, right, that have caused so much misery in the world for 200 years. The earlier plagiarized versions of the Bible were the Greek original and the Latin Vulgate. These versions were translated by Martin Luther, William Tyndale, and other Protestant translators over the last 5 centuries from the Greek Septuagint and the Greek original, the Greek New Testament translation from the Aramaic. So that's why we stress Brian with the beard, Santa Claus beard and the glasses, and his video, the Bible Society and Their Lies, the American Bible Society and Their Lies, because he's basically unbeknowingly is confirming what Victor Alexander is saying here, and also Victor N. Alexander unbeknowingly is verifying what he is saying, right, through their personal research. These then were further translated by the American translators until we have the situation today for all these versions of the Bible, and thousands of denominations, each with their own individual interpretations. The Disciples' New Testament, or the Aramaic New Testament, is then the only accurate and non-prejudicial translation of the original New Testament scriptures by a native Aramaic-speaking translator. He's from Bet Nahrein, or Mesopotamia, Syria, and he speaks that Aramaic. He's been translating these scriptures for over 15 years. Okay, so someone out there says, his exegesis, his footnotes, his exegesis, etc., is bias, prejudice, all this sort of stuff. People say, that's the type of translators. It all depends on the translators, if they're adding their own personal bias or prejudice, etc., etc. Okay, he made his mission not to do that, and to translate all, staying as faithful as he can to those original manuscripts, and when translating into English, having the nearest English equivalent where possible, because there's a lot of words that there is no English equivalent for it, like milter and versus so he had to look around for a word that would befit that, and he found manifestation. On the back of this Aramaic New Testament, translated by Bet Alexander, the back cover, Yeshua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, spoke in the Galilean dialect of Asherit, the language spoken at Nineveh at the time of Jonah the prophet, commonly known as ancient Aramaic. This is the language in which the disciples and the apostles preached the gospel, and the scribes recorded the scriptures. The New Testament has been preserved in this sacred scribal language since the apostolic age. The whole Bible was originated in this language. Yeah, because they hid it, these texts, like Thomas, whatever Christ did, said, whatever, what they witnessed as witnesses, or as testators, they someone wrote it down. Might be Matthew or something like that, or someone else, because obviously a tax collector might have those skills, writing and mathematical skills, or that sort of stuff. So it was preserved in the sacred scribal language since the apostolic age, because when the church of Jerusalem was burnt, AD 70, the temple or whatever was destroyed, or this basically might be referring just to that when that church was destroyed, right? Someone picked up these texts and ran with it. Okay, went across lands, probably went through China, because there's a stele that supposedly Bet Alexander, when he did his travels to the British Museum, French Louvre in Paris, or whatever museum, whatever, right? He might have come across it, him and his wife, and they went to Norway and all this sort of stuff, and he found that it had Chinese up the top, and to his surprise it had Aramaic underneath. So it indicated to him that somebody must have ran through there, right? Must have gone through there and put Aramaic on there, and then the stele was put up. Okay, so he states here some Aramaic New Testament. This translation is made from the original Aramaic text directly into English, bypassing the errors of the Greek original, the Latin Vulgate, and all the other Western translations made from them. This is an effort to rekindle that apostolic faith, or the apostolic faith of those disciples, in the name of Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, throughout the world. Bet Alexander, translator. Okay, so we're going to look at this video of his, okay, to hear what he has to say.
Hello, this is Bet Alexander. I've been translating the scriptures for 15 years. I've already completed the New Testament and published it. And now I'm doing the Old Testament commentaries. So today I'm going to start with...
Well, he was at that time, but he hasn't completed all of those because he had some issues, etc., etc. So we can bring you the entire New Testament through our videos, through our channel and our videos, but a lot of the Old Testament we can't until he finishes or completes the entire Old Testament. Unfortunately, his website was down, but we found a way, fortunately, to resurrect it and present it to all via our channel, the Ministry of the Real Truth, and the videos that we create and upload.
The book of Genesis, and I'm going to pick on one concept only, and that is the creation of Adam and Eve. So I'm going to read from the Sapra Brita, which means the script.
Okay, so what he said there was not Superb Rita, he said the Sapraya Brita, which is the original ancient Aramaic sacred scribal Old Tongue, which he translated into English. So it's the Supraya Brita, or as you know it, or all of you know it, Genesis in English. Yeah, it's a problem with these subtitles, to give you the wrong word. So it's not Superb Brita, it's Supraya Brita.
scripture or scroll of creation, which is how we call Genesis. It's also how modern Jews today call the first book of Moses. They call it Brashit. So
That was Bereshit, not brush eat.
I begin from Untitled Chapter 1, verse 1. Brashit bara alaha yachmaya.
It'll be Brashit bara Allah Yamaya. Something like that.
Barid alaha is also means son of God. And Brashit means at the
Bereshit.
beginning, before
That's Bereshit.
the beginning, before the foundations of the universe. This term I have done a whole tape on just this one word. Brashit encompasses the whole scriptures, because bara is light, bara is sun, brishit means at the beginning, at the head. It has a lot more meanings. The word just made up two letters, beat, uresh, that is B and R, has vast roots and meanings in the language. So
what he does on his down website that we resurrected, right? It has there, in the beginning, the Son of God, with a footnote indication, created the heavens and the earth. And then in the footnotes, he's basically suggesting you compare it with John 1 verse 1. Okay? In the beginning, as the beginning, the Milta, M-I-L-T-A, Andrew Gabriel Roth puts it as the Milta from the Eastern Syriac Peshitta. Okay, so there's no English equivalent or meaning to that word in the Aramaic, right? So you had to run around and find it, and you found manifestation, which basically means that it was something like everybody knew God, right? They never saw God, and there was just something that wasn't yet revealed, but eventually it was revealed. Okay, in John 1 verse 1 to 3 or 4, okay, stating in the beginning was the Milta, okay, with the manifestation, and God was the manifest. God was the embodiment of that manifestation. So it's basically revealing. It's been revealed that He was always there in the beginning, as the beginning. Okay, there's a lot of people out there say, "Oh no, there's no, there never was a Jesus Christ, never existed. He's not the Messiah." Dreaming, all this sort of stuff. You wish, right? So from the very first sentence of the Brita, Brita, or Genesis, it states in the beginning the Milta, with the manifestation, the embodiment of God, or God being the embodiment of it, created the heavens and the earth. He was in the beginning, and He was that beginning. So that verifies that He did exist, yeah, just in His heavenly form. Yeah. Okay, so this Church of the East, going back over our notes, stated that it was never translated, this ancient sacred scribal old tongue or language, Lishana Atika Cyprea, of the Kitab Asheret or Asheri, was never translated into any foreign language, as the high priest knew the language, so read it from the congregation, read it from the liturgy to the congregation or mass, who also spoke the Aramaic or Syriac, etc., from their liturgy. They never modified it over the centuries or translated the original ancient, very old manuscripts into Greek, Latin, Old Germanic, English, etc. It wasn't until Victor in Alexander sought to translate the original Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic Scriptures into English, and he was doing the Syriac, translated from the Eastern Syriac apparently, and this high priest that he met, befriended, said, "Why'd you do that for?" Because Syriac's actually wrong. He gives a reason, something like, well, they translated the Greek using the Syriac. So he buys this Bible format style copy of the original manuscripts, and he finds a method to revive that old ancient dead language that no one uses, right? And then he translated it into English. So all those out there think they're smarter than him, they got all the qualifications, you know, they've actually learned the modern vernacular, the Syriac, or the modern Hebrew, or modern Greek, or some Latinized form of Greek. That's what they're using. They're not using this original ancient Galilean Aramaic, which supposedly is of the Ninevite Aramaic, which Jonah spoke, and it was underneath the cuneiform text of the Ashurbanipals, or the king. When Jonah went to Nineveh, this king says, right, we're going to convert to Jonah's God, the one true God. Let's smash all our idols and put on sackcloth and throw dust all over ourselves, and do that to the animals as well, because we're taking on his God, right? So apparently it was underneath the cuneiform on these tablets. So that's the language that he's using. He's translated from, right? Okay, he's not using the modern Syriac. So just trying to see if it's on this page again. Yeah. Okay, so he's using the Asher. Okay, so we basically verified according to those original ancient, very old manuscripts from the original second scribal language that Jesus the Christ existed. There's also videos of Dutch Uncle John and others where they look at the pictographs, the Hebrew words, the pictographs, etc., and they verify that, you know, Genesis 1 verse 1, etc., underneath like different layers, or different layer or something like that this God was like the head of this tent, or the owner of this tent. He was the keeper of the tent and all this sort of stuff, you know. And it's basically saying that Christ is prophesied that Christ would at some point, say 4,000 years later, willingly put himself up on a cross as a sacrifice for the sins of all men. Okay, so that verifies there, supposedly both in the Hebrew and the Aramaic, at that pictograph stage, that this Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah, or Jesus the Christ, actually existed, okay? And he was revealed, manifested, he became God in the flesh, incarnated in the flesh, God on earth as a man, and spread the good news, etc., etc., through his disciples. So we're going to carry on with this.
I won't go into that this morning, as I have done it already. I'm just going to go on with the other verses regarding Adam. Brashit bara Allah yad Shmaya yad Ara. Shmaya is heaven and Ara is earth. Because there was nothing at the beginning, there was no time or space. So he created everything, time and space. And now I'm going to go and read from the book of creation, the story of how Adam and Eve were created, how he...
Okay, so he does that, and what we're going to do is we're going to jump. This is very important that we'll see this. I know we've covered it in other videos.
Which is Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Messiah. It's the symbol of Allah Ashur, which is the symbol of God, or the Godhood. Ashur with the sun, the wings of the Holy Spirit, and the Father in the bosom of the Father. So it's Ashur.
See, so he's explaining this. This verifies the ancient triune. Yeah. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's gone deep into it. We will do that probably in the next video. okay, what it actually means. We understand and believe that this originally was like Sumerian, Akkadian, etc. Right, but this picture here was changed because the old Assyrian version of this, and it's just a completely different thing, was a king called Asher with an arrow, probably pointing the other way, with this arrow, and it looks like it's been adopted and adapted. Right, it's changed. It has this different figure without the arrow, etc. Right, but he has a crown of righteousness, etc., etc. So this is the triune, which is different from the Christian understanding concept of the Trinity, supposedly put together by the Roman Tertullian. You go do your personal research on that, because a Christian said to us, no, that's all rubbish, didn't come from him, the guy hadn't done his homework. Right, we have, so we can do that to prove that. Right, okay, that concept came from a Roman, and it's completely different, as is Elohim. Okay, Elohim has a different ending from the Hebrew Elohim, Elohim, and they have there's two different meanings. Possibly in the Hebrew, Elohim means the one, or the one God, something like that. We're not proficient in Hebrew, but we could look online or ask a practicing Jew what does it actually mean. But they are two different concepts, right? They have two different meanings. Even though the original ancient, very old Aramaic or Assyriac was a sister language of the original ancient, very old Tav Ivri or Avri, or the original ancient, very old Hebrew. They had same words, same meanings, until a point where it was probably modified, maybe by the Masoretes or through the Masoretes. So now you have the same words but with different meanings. Okay? Like, for example, you have a Yuma, which is when translated in English, it was immeasurable period or unfathomable period, era, eon, age, or day with a capital D, to do with the creation of the two suns, or the sun and the moon, and the lunar solar cycle. And the Yom, the word Yom, which is Hebrew, which is day with a little d, which probably with them means a literal day of the week, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of night, right? And that all creation was done in 6 literal days, and God rested on the 7th. Churches teach that as well. Okay, so this is very, very old. It has a very different meaning. It's also referred to as over the flames. Elohim over the flames. We'll do a video on that, as we promised, at some point.
It's the symbol of the Son, which is Ishamshicha, Jesus the Messiah, prophesied thousands of years before the scriptures were written. So I use the symbol because this is not a pagan god, as some people seem to think. And I even saw a program on television that said that, something about Anunnaki coming from outer space and all this sort of thing. These programs I saw on the History Channel.
Yeah, that's George Snuffleupagus, or whatever his name is, Philopoulos, whatever. He really gets into all that sort of stuff. Apparently, we found out with Victor Alexander's website, we found on there that he said about Zechariah Sitchin and something, what's his name? The chariots of the gods. Van Daniken, they made stuff up to fit the evolution concept, right? Etc., etc. So be aware of those two.
Talk about aliens coming to Earth and all these symbols of the Trinity, of Allah, God, and all the sort of the creation, everything is explained in terms of aliens conducting genetic splicing and creating the human race, etc., etc. Now,
so yeah, as we said earlier, we would use logic and common sense knowing that someone or something created us, right, brought us into existence. We really believe in this Brita, Genesis, creation, text, etc. Right? We're just using logic and common sense that, again, that we were created, as human beings were created and then brought into existence, right? Or there's the alternative, if this all proves wrong, there's that alternative that these extraterrestrial confederation, conglomeration did all this genetic splicing, hybridization, etc. because they needed to save their dying planet, or this sort of Zechariah Sitchin stuff, if it proves to be 100% established fact, true, and so forth. Okay, so we think that's probably enough ones.
This is pictographic language. This is not paganism. So, if the translation of the scriptures was merely taking an electronic file of one of the Bible translations and simply substituting certain words here and there and correcting some mistakes in grammar or in the word meanings or something like that, I would have finished the whole Bible by now. I would have published the whole scriptures. But my purpose is not just to make money.
Yeah, as we said, he didn't complete it because he had some issues, health issues, etc. But he did the complete New Testament. So we try to bring you as much as we can of both his translation of the OT, or Old Testament, and the New Testament. So, back to our notes. We can have a little look at this. Who are the Asherite? Preface. Who writes the history of a nation such as the Asherite 26 centuries after the biblically famous capital Nineveh was abandoned to the enemy? That's where Jonah went, right? To these Asherite. The American missionaries who established the first medical missionary college, the Kala in Urmia, Iran, were mostly impressed by the Asherite people's retention of their Christian faith in a sea of Islamic nations surrounding them, but predictably not concerned with their ancient roots. They learned of the surviving Christian nation only in the late 19th century, after archaeological discoveries of biblical cities in North Mesopotamia. They were amazed that the Asherite had established the greatest church during the 12th century, incidentally surviving to this day as the Church of the East. They learned that according to the Asherite people themselves, the name of the nation Asher, or Asher in Greek, because they don't have the SH sound in their language, was not important in the sight of God. From the apostolic age onwards, the Asherite had come to call themselves only Christians, and since their Christianity had emanated from Syria through the work of such apostles as the Saint Adai, they most commonly referred to themselves as Syriac, which means of the Syrian persuasion or Christian. There's a footnote there on that. Theodorus Mar Shimun, or Isa Shimun, the brother of the late patriarch Mar Shimun 23, is the source for this explanation of the name commonly used by the modern day Asherite in referring to themselves. Okay, they say that they're not Assyrians, they're Asherite. Apparently there's a difference between it. Some might say they are. Yeah, you have to take that with an Assyrian. Pronounced Asherite. Assyrian is the Anglicized version, that's the Anglicized version of the name Asherite. It is theorized by Asherite scholars that the Greeks, who were the first to write of Asher, or Asher, do not have the letter Sheen, the sound of the letter Sh, and therefore came up with the spelling Asher for Asher. Asher for Asher. So that's why they had the name of the country was Assyria. Okay, and on the end of it is a N suffix, which is a loan word of the Greek and the Latin, which means that this region belonged or was possessed by a certain people. Neither does the English language have the letter Sheen for the sound of Sh. However, unlike Greek, the sound of the Aramaic, a Western designation for the ancient language of the Asherite, the phonetic Sh is commonly used in English, for example, in the word shame. But when it came to constructing a name for the Asherite nation in the English language, Assyrians was used. Victor Alexander personally believes that it was a malicious designation and unsportsmanlike of the English to kick someone who had fallen down. No major nation has changed its very name to reflect its religion. When the Asherite people discovered that Jesus Christ was the living God personified, it's coming from the horse's mouth, from these Asherite people who had discovered that Jesus Christ was the living God personified, they stopped calling themselves Asherite and adopted the name Christians. Missick, of the anointed one in the Asherite language, or more commonly Syriac. Very hard, I don't know Aramaic, as Victor Alexander has indicated. So it's a different type of Christian, because these disciples, etc., under the Romans, pagans, they don't want to be called Christians in their concept of it, because it's a borrowed word, loan word from the Greeks, right, which means slaves to Christos, or basically slaves. They don't want anything to do with any pagans, that had bull sacrifices, did this, did that, right? So they used the term Missick, of the anointed one, or followers of the Messiah, right? In the Asherite language, or more commonly Syriac, as he's indicated. The Asherite then went further and literally retired the word master and its derivatives, Mr, Mrs, and Miss, from the language in honour of the Lord Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary, Maran Yahshua Mashiach, which means our Master Jesus Christ, and Mariam, which means our Mistress Mary, etc., etc. As a result, the Asherite identity as a nation has become suspect for too long. The designation for this once world empire, Asher, has been out of use 26 centuries. In fact, that today's nations hardly remember that such a people ever existed. And as for the continuity of ancient lineage, there's even more skepticism. The new interest in Christianity, especially from the TV evangelists and the born-again movement, has ironically been responsible for the shedding of new light on the Assyrians as a sort of biblical people. Granted that it is for the most part negative in reference, note the often mentioned cruelty of the Assyrians in dealing with the ancient world during these broadcasts. This reference to the Assyrians is only in context of an ancient people who are no longer extant among world cultures. And Westerners, the major universities and churches, do not accept the Asherite as a surviving nation. Not even the British allies of the First and Second World Wars, who had enlisted the participation of the Asherite as an ally. The Asherite were referred to as the smallest ally, and had the grace of mentioning the Asherite as a surviving nation in modern historical books. To this day, none of the Allies officially recognise the Asherite contribution to the Allied cause during the two world wars. Why is that so? If it was a simple answer, Victor Alexander would not be writing this book, or this translation. And if the question could be answered by one book, he would have written this one 17 years ago, when he started doing research and realised the discrepancy in the Allied nations' histories. Because they are promised their land back. That was stolen from them, apparently, by these British, and the British reneged. They did the dirty on them and didn't follow through. Okay, guys, what about the Israeli or American Jewish scholars? Why wouldn't they write of their survival? Didn't the Asherite and the Jewish people speak and write an identical language called Aramaic at the time of Jesus Christ? Wouldn't that fall within the world of scholarship to write the Asherite history as a companion to their own history? Yeah, they don't make any mention of it. They say, oh, we use this script here as the Asherite, or this sort of stuff, right? We're using or speaking the Asherite when they're not. And then they say, oh, we've got a modern Hebrew, Israeli Hebrew, or it's the old Phoenician that we're using, comes from there, or this sort of stuff, right? They don't acknowledge the Asherite. Okay? There's no mention of it. How can we expect anyone to accept their survival as a nation from antiquity if none of the scholars or learned people bother to write about it? Their people, right? Of course, there have been books written on the subject of modern day Asherite and their affairs, but no one has dealt satisfactorily with the actual survival of the Asherite. No one has produced acceptable scholarship in this regard for the Western world to include within their universities and official libraries. No one argues about the Jews. Yes? No one denies the Jews did survive. But did the Greeks? Greeks are still called Greeks today. However, are they like the Greeks of the times of Aristotle though? Did the Romans survive? Did the Egyptians of the Pharaohs? Did the Vikings? these are questions with problematic answers. Who decides if the integrity of a culture survives? Who decides which nation has retained its cultural characteristics sufficiently that it can be said to have survived from its ancient roots and therefore may retain its original name? Ironically, in the case of the Asherite, there is a magnificent branch of archaeology called Assyriology, a branch totally devoted to the study of the Asherite as an extinct civilization of Mesopotamia. The Chicago University Department of Oriental Studies has published a multi-volume book called the Chicago Assyrian Dictionary, commonly referred to as CAD by the scholars of Assyriology, which encompasses the entire subject of Ashur, Babylon, Sumer, and other major cities of ancient Mesopotamia. Yeah, Stephanie Daly, another guy called Thorenson, and quite a few others. Many of today's Ashurite naively draw strength from this designation of a unifying scope, namely that CAD implies that Asher is still extant in the context of the survival of its common language, a language which is still spoken in many modern dialects such as Syriac, just a modern dialect, or Assyrian as it is commonly called by American Asherite, Chaldean, Syrian, Jacobite, Maronite, Aramite, a Jewish minority in North Iran, and others. Victor Alexander states here that he was aware that he was writing about a vast subject, but he felt the urgency to write something because nobody is writing or had written on the subject of the survival of the Asherite with regard to the survival of the essence of the Asherite character and civilization. Therefore, he wrote for the preservation of what his circle of the Asherite share in common knowledge, for the edification of his generation and for his friends, regardless of their nationality, religion, or place of origin. His deepest impulse was to promote goodwill and understanding for the Asherite survival cause among the nations of the Middle East and the rest of the world, and especially being an American, because he moved to America, he would like to share the knowledge of the Asherite civilization with his American friends. Even though what he had to say might seem strange at times, his biggest hope for the future of the Asherite is a sense of unity, which will ultimately be the only road to recognition of their survival as a people of antiquity. Indeed, the people who define the meaning of the word civilization. Without rediscovering the Asherite civilization from its roots and following the continuity of humankind's development throughout the ages, in the context of those roots, the very concept of civilization will become obsolete in time, because no concept, even the concept of civilization, can survive forever without the omission of its roots. He also wrote knowing that this work would be perceived by most scholars as being grossly inaccurate. Yet we can bring you some comments from a person with 2 doctorates in the Aramaic and Hebrew who seems to drop hints of that, saying that there's no original manuscripts, full copies of it, where Victor Alexander actually states the Church of the East hid them for 2,000 years, therefore preserving them. He puts here, because no concept, even the concept of civilization, can survive forever without the omission of its roots. Again, he also wrote knowing that this work will be perceived by most scholars as being grossly inaccurate if you allow him to use a charitable word towards his own effort. Accuracy depends on repeated perceptions of history, in this case, of a culture from an unbiased perspective. When a nation is homeless, then there are few scholars who will take up the pen to write an unbiased account of the history, even of their survival. So that verifies, as we keep telling people, he didn't add his own bias, prejudice, twist it, add his own flavour, etc. to the scriptures. Okay, he made it his mission to translate into the nearest English equivalent wherever possible. Sometimes the ancient Aramaic doesn't have a word equivalent, right, to the English. So again, he has to go around and find it in translating, so people understand what it's trying to say, right? Yeah, and there's people that just say, oh, he's like every other translator, he's biased, got prejudice, all that sort of stuff. No. It's his own words there from the horse's mouth. Okay, that he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to add that, right? So he didn't use the modern Bible versions as a translation or something to translate from, because of didn't want that embedded in the subconscious or this sort of stuff. We can cover that, what he said about that also. So we've studied what his former website, right, that's downed, but we found a way to resurrect it, so we know what we're talking about. If he thinks, no, you're giving the wrong information, or we're hoping that he'll come in and point it out to us, right? But we're basically going by what he's saying here, what he said on his website, va.com, right? He says, when a nation is homeless, then there are few scholars who will take up the pen to write an unbiased account. So that's what he's doing. He's writing. He translated an unbiased account of their history, their text, everything, even of their survival. Nevertheless, he does have complete faith in the knowledge that he is presenting the truth, because he believed Western scholarship is terribly biased. Okay, so that's where it's biased. In the recording of history in the absence of a profit incentive. It ain't going to make you money. Okay. And he felt that it was his obligation as a minority writer to present an Asherite point of view. And he wishes to thank certain people who made possible the publication of this translation of this book. It's the First Civilization. Named the First Civilization. Okay. He's saying thanks to the Syrian American National Federation Incorporated, etc. He's very appreciative of the American people, through whose achievement and freedom and democracy it is possible for an individual to gather the knowledge freely available at American libraries and present it in printed form for the public to read. Yeah, it's in the public domain, public access, it's available, etc. He thanks Jesus Christ for keeping him under his merciful guidance all his life, without whom he is nothing. Yeah. So he strongly believes in Yeshua Mashiach. Okay, so we are going to jump to another man. Actually, we're going to go right back here. Okay, to this man here, Dr. James D. Fransisco. He's got 2 PH.ds or doctorates in the Aramaic and the Hebrew, the Syriac and the modern Syriac and the modern Hebrew, which is different from Victor Alexander, native-born Aramaic-speaking translator, who has gone back right through this method he used to revive this old dead language, right? So he can translate those manuscripts into English. Okay, so there's quite a few comments here. Okay, we added our 50 cents worth. We've asked this guy, because he's an expert, right? So we're asking him questions. Okay? We're not asking someone in a garage, run-down garage at the back of their house with a certificate from some school, right? Or, they bought it online. Okay, so we've asked them questions like, because someone said the book of Isaiah was entirely written in Hebrew, not Aramaic. Maybe they're of the Judaic faith. So we asked them, what's the book of Isaiah entirely written in Aramaic? Was told it never was, even though Google search has many websites saying it was, and the ancient Aramaic Isaiah has been translated from the Aramaic into English. So he kindly replied, the book of Isaiah was written in Hebrew. There's an Aramaic version called the Peshitta. This has been translated into English by Lamsa in the Antioch Bible series. There's also an Aramaic translation in Targum Jonathan. Okay, so we've previously asked him about Victor Alexander, right? Yeah, so we're saying thank you for that, because it is good information, right? For us. There's also Victor N. Alexander's translation of it in full from the supposed original ancient very old Galilean Aramaic. I showed what I believe to be a Judaic or Hebrew onlyist and others like that, but they were insisting that I was wrong, dreaming as far as not mentioning Jesus in any of the OT texts at all. They often comment me or ask there was no prophecies of him in Psalms, Daniel, etc. because Rabbi Tobiah Singer, etc. say there isn't, so they say there isn't. Must be true, right? And also, as we mentioned before, Google has numerous websites where experts, like himself, and non-experts say that the book of Isaiah was written in Aramaic, not Hebrew. It as you say, it was maybe a copy that was written in Aramaic. And Victor N. Alexander says on his now downed website that he was asked by a high priest of the Church of the East why he was translating the NT using the Syriac Eastern Peshitta, which was written in Greek, then translated into the Aramaic from there at some point, then into the English. So he bought a copy of those original ancient, very old, hidden, therefore preserved manuscripts, of which he reads from on his YouTube video, Adam and Eve, the Aramaic Scriptures, which we just covered. Okay, this one here. Okay, it's a mistake here. It should be Adam and Eve. Jeez, give the guy a break. Bit of humour there. Okay, here it is here. We ask him, what is the proof that Jesus existed outside of the Bible? That no one can deny as established fact, evidence that proves itself beyond any doubt that he existed. And would you make the disciples to be regarded as irrefutable? Or would it make the disciples then to be regarded as irrefutable and their writings text infallible? Because we're doing this video, right? To verify that he actually existed. Okay, so he replies, that I posted quite a bit here. There's a lot of garbage on the internet and much fantasy about Aramaic and religion in general. Outside the Bible, there's only a small section of Josephus written during the 1st century regarding Jesus, but he is not alone, because there's little written about anyone outside of the writings of their own group. Isaiah doesn't mention Jesus. Messianic texts are used as Pesharim. Okay, something to do with Hebrew, right? Obviously that's in Hebrew. In the Gospels, the first 2 chapters of Matthew and Luke were probably later additions to a more pristine Gospel, or better version of it. Each book of the Bible is separate and may have been written in different languages, Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek. To dogmatically argue whether Greek or Aramaic Syriac was first is futile. Okay, so he replied to that in regard to his answers to us. There's a lot of garbage on the internet and much fantasy about Aramaic and religion in general. Extremely true. Outside of the Bible, there's only a small section of Josephus written during the 1st century regarding Jesus. True. And he became the adopted son of Flavius, right? And wrote in such a way to please his new Roman family, yeah? Victor N. Alexander has translated the entire book of Isaiah, and there's a prophecy he details in his footnote that Yeshua Mashiach is mentioned in the first verse, Isaiah 45:1. Allah, or God, speaking to his Messiah, the anointed one, or his anointed one, not Cyrus the king, but his anointed one, Yeshua, Yeshu, right? The book of Isaiah prophesies about the coming of Yeshua, or Jesus the Messiah. The book of Isaiah is also a book of revelation, the revelation of Yeshua, Jesus. So it was revealing him, right? Okay, because all men knew of God, but they never seen God. They couldn't look upon the face of God and hope to live, etc., etc. Moses was afraid to look at God face to face. John in Revelations only saw his legs, arms, clothing, right? Jeremiah only saw him passing by, and he only saw his back or something like that, and so forth, right? So it's all there in the Old Testament. Okay, it's just people don't have that original ancient sacred scribe or old tongue, Nishana Artika, Cypriot, of the Kitab Esher, translated into English. They've got all these modern versions, where they study become adept in the modern Syriac, Hebrew, or Greek, or Latinized form of Greek. Yeah. So here's what Isaiah 45:1 says in Victor N. Alexander's translation of Isaiah 1. Thus said the Maya to his Messiah, to Koresh, whom I took by my right hand. Here's the footnotes here. 45:1. Literal Aramaic retained the Lord. The Lord. Reference is to Joshua, the Messiah, or Jesus the Messiah, and the Father. So it's the Father talking to his anointed one, i.e. his Son. To Koresh, footnote indication here, or to Koresh. To Koresh, whom I took by my right hand. 45:1-2. Literal Aramaic idiom, Missick, or his anointed one, Missick, or his anointed. Cyrus is not the Messiah. It is the Messiah who speaks through this prophecy. Okay. 45:1-3, literal Aramaic idiom or expression. Cyrus, king of Persia, was used as a servant of the Lord who carried out the conquest of the Holy Lands before Joshua, the Messiah, would come to earth. Okay, the temple was destroyed. They went into Babylonian exile. They couldn't do their religion. Remember the song, Rivers of Babylon? We remember the rivers of Babylon, where we wept, where we remember Zion, okay, Israel, right, and the temple, etc. Right. So it was a way through God through Cyrus, to let his people within his kingdom practice their religion, and then they could eventually go back to Jerusalem and repair that temple, or rebuild the temple, right? Not all of them went back. So Cyrus, king of Persia, was used as a tool, or a means, as a servant of the Lord who carried out the conquest of the Holy Lands before Joshua the Messiah, or Jesus the Messiah, would come to earth. Right? God incarnate. You posted quite a bit here. This is what he says up here. Me, is that good or bad? Sorry if it is, as I am a truth seeker, driven to find it. It's a passion, right? When you have that passion, you're driven by it. And you are an expert. This guy here, he's an expert with 2 doctorates. So I'm asking you things, not the garage ones with a mere certificate from high school lessons in the Aramaic, etc. So we pose him another question, because he says he met and talked with Victor Ian Alexander and Rabbi Tobias Singer and Andrew Gabriel Roth. Right? And he gives his opinions on them, what he thought of them. So ask him, is it possible to give me a deeper critique on what you think of Victor Ian Alexander? Is he one to be trusted, or in a land of mythos, fantasy, or something else? As a guy named Bennett on his blog has written some unusual Victor claims, and I'm trying to get Victor Ian Alexander, should be 2, not yo, give me details on if they're true, as it could change history as we've been sold it. Right, the Adolf Hitler World War II Holocaust thing, the Elephant Man, and so forth. Unfortunately, we got no reply from him on that, as he of late disappeared, or quite a year back or so, disappeared, as was hospitalised for 56 days, and might have been a bit foggy in memory wise, and under an older age problem condition. You're not going to mention it because out of respect, right? Yeah. So we are replying to his statement, each book of the Bible is separate and may have been written in different languages, Hebrew, Aramaic and Greek. So asking, would that be the original, ancient, very old Aramaic, say that Lishana Atika, we always spell it wrong, Cypriot, Tav Esheret, and the original, ancient, very old Tav Ivri, or the original, ancient, very old Hebrew, the sister language of the Esheret, and the classical or Koine Greek or Attica Greek. And here's our reply to, you posted quite a bit here, sorry, I'm a fan of your works. Yeah, okay. So he replies, my advice is to forget about the claims concerning Victor and study the Peshitta. It would be good to study Aramaic so you can interpret the Peshitta text yourself. I have YouTube videos on this channel that may help with some general study topics. An example is the word Mashiach in Hebrew, or Mashiach. I've been told in comments it's nothing to do with the Mashiach, the Messiah, okay, by a practicing Jew. It appears throughout the Bible and applies to the high priest, kings, and even Cyrus and Isaiah. No, it doesn't. It doesn't apply. So this is where they go wrong. They make these claims, even though this guy's an expert, right? We gave him the verse, right? Here, he's not the Messiah. He's not the Mashiach, or is the anointed one. It's talking about the Messiah is, right? Cyrus is not the Messiah. It is the Messiah who speaks through his prophecy. So that's why we say to people out there, be careful. This guy, yeah, he's got his doctorates, all that sort of stuff, but they could be completely off whack, right? Off track, okay? Which we've just verified there through showing him what Victor Alexander actually put, right? we translated Isaiah 45:1. Okay? The idea of the Messiah is a Jewish construct. Well, it can't be if the Jew came through our comments and said, no, this Messiah has nothing to do with the Moshiach. Right? Mosiach. The idea of the Messiah is a Jewish construct adapted by Christianity. Yeah, okay, it would be adapted by Christianity, right? Because they've taken a lot of root things from Judaism, right? And constructed it into Christianity. And the idea of Christ. There are numerous Messiahs mentioned throughout the Bible. And those really familiar with Hebrew and Aramaic know this. Yeah, David was called a Christ, right, because he was anointed by Saul. But Christ was Jesus the Messiah, or Esau the Messiah, was Messiah, his Messiah, or Messick. He was anointed by God, not by some man with oil. Okay? Okay, so you have to know Hebrew and Aramaic to know that, right? That's what he's saying. His work goes beyond religious views and examines what the texts really do say. Yeah, according to his the modernized Syriac and Hebrew. It's not the original ancient, very old Lashana Artika Cypriot, the language of God, the old sacred scribal old tongue or language. So there's a difference. That's the difference between Victor N. Alexander's translation and his. He's using the modern Syriac, right? Yeah, in the Hebrew, okay. It's not the original. Considering an accurate translation of the text, these notes 45:1 were retained. The lauded reference is to Yoshua the Messiah and the Father. Okay, yeah, we'll put here. Anointed Soros is not the Messiah. It is the Messiah who speaks through this prophecy. Absolutely incorrect in his opinion. That's his opinion, and an example of inserting later Christian ideas into ancient pre-Christian texts. For more information on this, so he puts this academia edu. Okay, this is modern man's understanding of it, right? Okay, so he's trying to say that he's putting that in that period, whenever Isaiah wrote those scriptures, somebody inserted later Christian ideas into an ancient pre-Christian text. Okay, where's the proof of that? Where's the evidence of that? Okay, so that's why we again say be very, very careful, because this guy, even though, out of respect, he's got 2 doctorates, Aramaic and Hebrew, modern Syriac and Hebrew, right? Be careful, right? Because he's not a fluent speaker, right? A natural speaker, right? He's not born from the East. As he says, he's a Gentile. Throughout this video, he says he's a Gentile. He hasn't lived under that culture, okay? He's learned it from books and stuff when he became interested in it. Yeah. And here he says, no one has copies of the originals called autographs by scholars. His view is that the Tanakh was originally written in Hebrew, obviously. Matthew was originally in a brief Aramaic. Originally, the other Gospels may have been in Aramaic. The epistles of James, Peter, and John may have been in Aramaic. Paul's epistles may have been in Greek. There's no absolute proof for any view regarding the original text. So we have put somewhere around here, okay, an answer to it. Where is it? Around here somewhere. Okay. Just look. Put an answer to it, right? Okay, this is to that person that had a comment, maybe a practicing Jew. Okay, that I take him as his word, because I said, he says probably never complete his works. So I says, how about teaching me your Aramaic? He says, it's probably too hard for you in Western mindset, right? Just trust my translation because they're accurate. So that's what I do, right? That's what we've done. We've taken him at his word, tried to catch him out over the years, but we've failed, right? Many different ways. We're like asking questions, 100 questions, to the point where you get so hacked off. You say, oh geez, you're annoying. We know that because that's what family members say to us. Take him at his word. We take him at his word. As he said, he was determined to leave out his personal bias, prejudice, and urge to twist it and leave out adding his own flavour to the text in English, as it was important to him to get the real apostolic message out there into the world, right? to his American friends, etc. And we found him to be a man of his word, so I respected him. I spent a year emailing him to catch him out as a liar or a nasty guy. He never once retorted me. We had a few chuckles because I find all the weirdest Aramaic things online. Okay? So yeah, you have to be really careful with these experts. Okay? This is our other channel name. Okay? And he says he uses the actual Aramaic in his lessons to others, right? Students, all that sort of stuff. So let's have a little listen, because he did say that he came across Victor Alexander. He sees he's in his own world, okay, doing his own thing. Rabbi Toby is singer. He found that he couldn't get his head around this Peshitta, the Aramaic Peshitta, and he has a dislike of the NT Gospels. So have a look at all these comments here. And he says, oh, you have been exposed to a lot of superficial and even misleading information. Okay. There are many churches that use Aramaic. Syriac is merely the Greek name, you understand that, for Lishana Aramaic. Okay. Aramaic, we know it as Lishana Artika. They are spoken in many near Eastern areas. A Chaldean church and a Syrian church is split. You know that. Okay. So I have to ask if Victor Alexander and Angel Gabriel Roth haven't got to that stage of asking this guy, but we will one day. But we do, as we said, we ask this guy a lot of questions. Okay, but because he's having problems, he doesn't respond, the next day like this guy. Right? He's busy doing something else. Okay. So I ask him questions because he says he would be happy to help, and he has the Italian translation or something. No, he doesn't actually. Okay. Here's the direct links to his video or something like that. Syriac, the end suffix ik is a Greek loanword, right, as is ear. So really there is no Syria, Asia, Pacific, Asiatic, Aramaic, etc. There are many churches that use Aramaic, the Syriac, not the ancient Katav Asheret or Tav Asheret, or Assyrian, or the Asherite, as there really was no Assyrian Aramaic, just Assyrian as told me by a native born Syrian, not Victor. Said used by today's Jews to be Hebrew, as the Assyrian Aramaic was a sister language. Vic translates the ancient Assyrian Aramaic because he's from Bet Nahrein. So in some, the original Assyrian Apostolic Orthodox Church of the Eastern Patriarchs are liars because of the different comments that he's given us. What's this here? Okay, he puts a restriction. Limit your questions on this channel to specific questions about the Bible or specific questions about Aramaic. This channel is not about your version of what is or not the truth about problems with various churches and translators. Okay, I was just telling him about the Hebrew Israelites who came at me and said God was black, Jesus was black, everything is black, and they make up names like Yahu, Wahi, Wahi, Wushi, 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 all this sort of stuff, Wadi, Wadi, for the names of God. And he got a bit iffy there, uppity there, and then he actually calmed down and answered, right? Okay, that there's no such word, no such a name in the Hebrew, having two doctorates, right, for that Yahu, Wadi, Wadi, or Wushi, Wushi that we heard a woman Nepal on the House of Consciousness utter. Alright, so she was lying through her teeth. Yeah. There's plenty more here. But yeah, have a look at the comments that we put in regards to this guy. Okay, so because we asked him, did he ever cover a study and keep notes on Vic Alexander? No, he never read it, but he had met them, all three of them, Rabbi Toby Singer, Victor Alexander, and Angel Gabriel Roth, and he has a video of him and Roth having a debate. Okay, here, got a question for you. There's a year ago. This was us on the other channel. Got a question for you. Do you think that the translators translators like Alexander or Victor Alexander, who speak the languages natively, have that natural Eastern mindset and know it better than you, even though you have perhaps Western ordered doctorates. As I noticed, many say this and that, in like Dylan Downs, he's a funny guy, covers the Lamsa, Aramaic Peshitta, all that sort of stuff. Does talk briefly on Victor and Alexander, who doesn't know Aramaic fluently. He admitted it. George Simmons, who says he went to university, etc., that Alexander translated Aramaic wrong, the Lord's Prayer, and they both think they know better, etc., even better than you. And he states, it's not that simple. If the native speaker is objective and is ready to put aside biases, and if they have studied thoroughly the subject matter, then they have an advantage. Yeah, well, he put aside, he said, Victor Alexander said, he knows that the Western theologians, etc., had prejudice and bias against the Assyrian, etc., as we mentioned earlier in the video. Right? And he wanted to bring the nearest English equivalent and stay as faithful to what those original manuscripts in the Aramaic actually said. Okay, so yeah, and even Andrew Gabriel Roth says that, he wanted a bias, prejudice-free translation of the Eastern Syriac Peshitta. He goes on about doctorates. He doesn't really care about that. He's focused on enjoying it, right? About Christ. Yeah. He does mention that he met Rabbi Toby Singer and Andrew Gabriel Roth, done a debate with him, and so forth. Okay, so we're going to listen to this guy for a little bit, because he rabbled on about us a bit too long.
Jim D. Fransisco again, presentation on Bible study from a Semitic perspective. We started on this in our first video in this series, where we spoke about the Aramaic language, and I want to go back and review the chart that says Principles of Holy Scripture Study. It's a chart by John Gresham, and it shows the world of the text. And I emphasize text a lot. I know that some of you are in different religious faiths. Some may be Jewish, some may be Christian. Many of you are probably Christian, various denominations. And some of you may be Islamic or even in other faiths. And frankly, for the purpose of this study, to me, it doesn't matter what faith you're in. I want to look at the text, not the creeds, not the doctrines, not the church practices, not what's happened to the text by the church over the years, or how the oral Torah has influenced the written Torah, or any of that.
Yeah, well, that's basically what we're doing at the Ministry of the Real Truth. Okay, we try to avoid all that sort of fluff, but people come at us with, you haven't got the original Hebrew Lashon Hakadesh, or it's not for you, not of the right race and colour, not a Hebrew Israelite, all this sort of crap, right? So we try to avoid that as well. So we might jump a bit here. It's not really.
Let's look at the written text. So as we do that, we see that there's a world within the text, and that is the actual literary context itself. What is this text about? And that gets into things like genre. Is this text law, like Torah, or Reta in Aramaic? Or is this text poetry? Or is it parable? Or is it symbolic?
We're going to jump again.
It's
to his book that he's
really...
Yeah, so this idioms, we remember him saying probably in this video or another one, that if you don't know the idioms, the Aramaic idioms, then you don't know them, you don't understand them and what they mean, because they're Eastern mindset expression, right, put across to potential readers. If you don't know them or understand them, then you don't know the Bible as well as you think you do, or you claim you do, or even boast that you do, right? Okay? And we put a comment down here somewhere asking him that, and he said, yeah, that's right, he said that, and that's true, right? Okay? So we try to back up our claims, our information, by providing links to the sources, okay? And as we said later on in this video, in his comments to him, Well, we see you as an expert, so we're trying to learn from you because you've got the 2 doctorates or whatever. We don't want to learn from some 2-bit peddler on the side of the road, right? Okay. You seem to have these adamant swings now and again, right? But then he mellows out. Yeah, so respect the guy because he's earned his stripes. But yeah, as you said, be careful because it looks like he's making some errors there in his claims. Okay, so we're going to jump and listen to this.
Be very difficult to make any sense out of it, and people will either try to force it to agree with the Synoptic Gospels, or they will try to deny that it has any value at all. I run into that many times. I ran into it just this week with a Jewish rabbi who took the story of the woman in adultery and just tore it apart. And the same thing with other aspects of that book. It's written on a level totally different than the Synoptic Gospels, and it should not be taken historically. Now, I know to some of you that sounds like blasphemy, but check it out. So John Sanford here, he talks about idioms and how the Greek idiom, ti emoi kai sol, in verse 4 of John 2, where this idiom means, what have I to do with thee, in the King James translation, that's the way it's translated, or why turn to me? And he says it's a Semitic-based idiom common to both the Old Testament and New Testament that is used in expressions in which the desire to turn away interference from another person. So the Jerusalem Bible also assures us that in verse 12, the reference to brothers does not refer to blood brothers of Jesus, but to the inner circle of the first disciples. To reinforce their point, they translate the verse, after this he went down to Capernaum with his mother and the brothers. However, the King James Version and other translations say, after this he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples. Since the Greek refers to both brothers, adelphoi, and disciples, matitai, the Jerusalem Bible would seem to be out of line here. One suspects that the translators of the Jerusalem Bible may be trying to protect the Roman Catholic idea that Mary was a virgin all her life. So there's an example of how Bibles are translated to fit the creeds, and that's exactly what we don't want to do. It's also an example of an idiom, and that's specifically what we're going to be covering today. Now, on the other side, to your right, we have the world beyond the text, the community.
So as he stated there in the video, perhaps the Jewish Publication Society are trying to protect that Roman Catholic concept that Mary was a virgin all her life. What is that meaning? What is that pertaining to, right? That they're sucking up to this supposed mother church, right? The Vatican, and their texts, their doctrines, whatever, or their belief. This being supposedly the false church of Revelations, if it's pointing to them, right? So what's going on there?
Of interpretation, the canonical context, the ecclesial context, and the liturgical context. How is the text used in liturgy? For example, do you really believe that when we have this Last Supper scene where Jesus is sharing bread and wine with his disciples, that he had in that setting a Eucharistic communion service? If you do, then you're looking at it from a liturgical context that pulls something into the text. If you're Messianic or Jewish, you might look at that as a Seder, as a Passover scene. But if you look at it carefully, you'll see that in the text itself, you will find neither. It is not a Seder scene, nor is it a Eucharistic celebration that's liturgical. Not in the text. You have to...
Okay. and he continues that. So we're going to jump a bit far more forward to where he's recommending something else.
That has to do with idioms, and we'll be going into idioms and metaphors here shortly. I'm going to point out a couple of things that I believe will help you tremendously in your study. One is to get good research materials, and I would strongly recommend that you get this book by my teacher, Dr. Rocco, and he covers the 7 keys. The 7 keys
Rocco Erico.
These are the basis of the first 7 principles that I use in my 10 principles of Bible study from a Semitic perspective. Today we're going to be going into chapter 2, which is the second key, or the idioms. There's also some other books relative to the idioms. One is Idioms in the Bible, and this is by Dr. George Lamza. He covers many idioms, and when I first read this, I probably reacted in a similar fashion to how some of you are going to react. How does he know that this idiom is there? How does he know that we can safely translate these literal words idiomatically? And the answer to that question, you'll find when you study Lamza, is because he grew up in that environment. Those idioms were passed down from family to family over millennia. So he was familiar with those idioms because he grew up in that environment. Another book that is more recent that came out is called Jesus Spoke Aramaic, and this book was written by Ewan McLeod over in the United Kingdom, and he covers a lot of good background information on Aramaic in his books. He's got a lot of videos on the internet, so there's many resources that you can use. When I first got into Aramaic studies, there were limited resources, and the internet per se didn't even exist yet in terms of common usage. So you could get a number of these books. The first 2, the Idioms and Let There Be Light, from Roth Foundation. That's Noohra Foundation. And Ewan's book you can get by going on JesusSpokeAramaic.com. So when you go on the internet, make sure that you're looking at good resources. If you have any questions about what is good and what isn't, write to me. And also, beware, as soon as you go back to your congregations, if they're not familiar with this, if you go back to a rabbi, the rabbi can say, this isn't even Aramaic, it doesn't sound like the Talmud, it doesn't sound like the Targums. No, it doesn't, because it's a different dialect that we're going to be talking about. What we call the New Testament is written in what scholars call Syriac. It's a form of Aramaic that was used to write the Gospels and the Epistles, and
it's a different language, right? That they'll use, the Syriac. Yeah, but as we possibly pointed out in other videos or earlier in this video, that Victor N. Alexander was translating. He decided to translate the supposed original, ancient, very old Syriac, Eastern Syriac Peshitta into English for his American friends, etc. And he just finished the New Testament apparently. He had translated Matthew, Mark, Luke, something like that. And he met this high priest from the Church of the East. Okay? To see what he's doing. And he says, I'm translating using the Syriac Peshitta. So the priest went away, came back, he says, what are you doing now? He says, I just finished Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, something like that. And working on Luke, something like that. And his, according to his website, right? Statements. And the high priest said, what did you do that for? He says, well, blah, blah, blah. And he says, no, because the Syriac is actually wrong. Something like it was translated from the Greek into the Syriac or the Aramaic or something like that, whatever. Right? So he says it was actually wrong. And he says when originally it was all written in the Asherit. So he goes, oh my gosh, I've just had to start all over again. I might not, because he's quite an elderly gentleman, they passed or whatever. And he was sick at the time and all this stuff, not well. He may not complete it. So I piped up through an email and says, well, okay, where's all their comment? Okay, teach me your Aramaic, oh wise one, and I'll continue work for you. But he says, it's very hard for a person with a Western mindset to actually learn that language, what he was translating. So trust his translation because it's accurate. So, okay, take him at his word. But we kept emailing him, dropping him, try to drop him in it, see if he was lying or that sort of stuff, try to catch him up. But we never did. This was like about a year or so. Trying to do that right through emails. Hundreds of emails, sending him hundreds of emails. And he never got offended. Like, stop sending me, stop asking me so many questions. He was very patient, very kind. So we grew to respect the guy and like the guy, right? Because his translation cleared up a lot of the confusions you get from your Americanized Bible versions, your churches, all that sort of stuff, from these people saying, oh, it's this, it's that, this is what it means, this is what it says, all that sort of stuff, right? Totally confusing you, baffling you, or trying to win you over, try to convert you by convincing you, right? Get your confidence so that then they can get the money out of you, all that sort of stuff, right? Whatever, all these different tricks they pull out of the bag and stuff, because we've experienced that. We base everything on our experience, right? Mainly on our experience that we've had with these so-called church Christians, right? They come around and all that sort of stuff. A friend of ours was the one who pulled the first tricks, so that's where we started to realise over the years what the hell's going on, Okay, so this is this guy, right? Okay. I'd be pretty careful. Let's have a look again.
All the books that we call the New Testament. Alright, now I want to read, before we get into the idioms in detail, I want to read from Jesus Spoke Aramaic. He wrote, and I'm looking at page 60, he says, prior to the 1880s, the time of Westcott and Hort, the major New Testament scholars.
Yeah, they're the ones that supposedly did the translation of the Jehovah's Witness, New World Translation, and they published it, whatever, and apparently they got a lot of flack from everybody out there in the world saying, oh, they're Freemasons, they're Satan, all this sort of stuff.
The following facts were universally accepted in the West about Aramaic in the Aramaic New Testament. Number one, it was accepted that Aramaic was the commonly spoken language in Israel by Jews in the 1st century AD, and therefore Aramaic was the language normally spoken by Jesus, the disciples, and Jews in general. Next, since it was accepted that Jesus and the disciples spoke Aramaic, as did Jews generally in the 1st century AD, it was understood that the Aramaic New Testament must therefore be as close as possible to get to the original words spoken by Jesus himself, and as close as possible to the original autographs of Scripture. It's very important. Highly contested, but very important. Next, it was universally believed that the Aramaic New Testament dated to as early as the 1st or 2nd centuries AD, and was therefore just as old as the earliest Greek manuscript fragments. Now, there's a lot in that paragraph. Number one, the Aramaic texts are old as the Greek. Secondly, the Aramaic text is complete. You have almost the entire New Testament except for 5 books, which I mentioned in my last video. So that's very important, because the Greek texts are fragmented and they're not in agreement with each other, whereas the Aramaic is intact and it is in agreement. Next, it was understood that the Aramaic New Testament was essentially free from all the myriad of variations that are found in manuscripts of the Greek New Testament.
Okay, so it does cover this extensively, but we're going back to when he made this comment about Victor and Alexander. Okay, trying to find it here. Okay, yeah, here. My advice is to us is to forget about the claims concerning Victor and Victor Alexander and study the Peshitta. Okay, so we have. Is it here? No, this is a different. This is a video or something. No, we're not looking at that. Where is it? AramaicScriptures.com. We have a link bookmark to this by Andrew Gabriel Roth, who says, "Welcome to the Holy Aramaic Scriptures. This website features the Holy Aramaic Scriptures preserved, okay, in the ancient Eastern Aramaic text of the New Testament in manuscripts such as the Ionian Codex, Kaboris Codex, which is pictured here. It's an original. The 1199 Horton Codex and the Mangana 148 Codex for you to read, study, etc., etc. A rendering of the holy biblical text in a fresh, accurate, and literal English translation." Okay. And here's the Syriac font, and he uses Syriac words, and he puts the English here, so if you want to learn the language, it'll be easy for you, right? So he's saying, "Tebutha, grace be with you, and Shalama, peace from Allah, Abun, God, our Father, and from Maran, Ishu, Mashika, our Lord Jesus, the Anointed One." And he's all the books here. And he goes into some information on the text, and that the Aramaic text used to translate here at the AramaicScriptures.com is from Eastern Aramaic manuscripts, such as the Kaboris manuscript pictured above. Okay. It being a handwritten Eastern Aramaic New Testament, said to have been scribed in the ancient city of Nineveh, which is thought to have taken place sometime between 800 to 1000 AD. Okay. But this Dr. James de Franciscus is saying there's no complete one, right, according to his statement here. No one has copies of the originals called autographs by scholars. Okay, well, they're copies, aren't they? Copies made, say, in the 2nd century AD to the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, right? Okay. What is this thing? Where is it? No, it's not it. Where are we? So what is this thing? This is not an original, according to him. Okay, no one has the original, or complete original. Okay, so wouldn't this guy here be lying? Andrew Gabriel Roth? Okay. The Aramaic text used to translate here at the AramaicScriptures.com is from Eastern Aramaic manuscripts, such as the Kaboris manuscript, pictured above, it being a handwritten Eastern Aramaic New Testament said to have been scribed in the ancient city of Nineveh, and which is thought to have taken place sometime between 800 to 1000 AD, and said to have been officially certified by a bishop of the Holy Apostolic Catholic Church of the East as being a faithful copy. Okay, it's a copy. So yeah, he would be right saying they don't have the original, but it's a faithful copy of a much older Eastern Aramaic New Testament manuscript, likely scribed during the mid-5th century, which in turn likely was itself a faithful copy of the original Aramaic New Testament scriptures believed to have been produced in the ancient city of Edessa in the late 1st or early 2nd century, and that's the one we are presenting in our videos, i.e. of Victor and Alexander. Okay. A number of Eastern Peshitta manuscripts have been examined for this translation, as well as the etc., etc., housed in the British Museum. The manuscript consulted for the actual translation, the manuscripts consulted for the actual translation are various 5th to 6th century manuscripts, like the Goodspeed MS716 manuscripts, number 17 and number 54, from St. Catherine's Monastery. Remember Passion of the Christ, where Mary dropped the hanky that she used to wipe her son's brow, right? That's from the St. Catherine's Dolores Passion. Okay, because Mel Gibson and Jim Caviezel, they are Orthodox Roman Catholics. They had to get permission from the Pope and Billy Graham, right, who's very friendly. He made a remark to the Pope one time about the Jews, right, and he got smacked over that and apologised. Okay. St. Catherine's Monastery, 7th century manuscripts like the Ionian Codex, 8th to 9th century manuscripts like the Paris Syriac 342 and so forth. Okay. Mangana Codex, which is known as the Textus Receptus of the Eastern Aramaic New Testament. These all were carefully compared when a scribal mistake in one of the manuscripts was made, while making certain that all the original Eastern readings were present in this English translation as preserved by the Holy Apostolic Catholic Church of the East since the time of the Apostles. So yes, sometimes they are prone to making mistakes, and it's discovered, okay, or revealed. It should be pointed out that the Aramaic language is an older sister language of the Hebrew. Okay, it's a derivative, right? It's one of those languages. Okay, or the Aramaic language, the Lishana Atika Cypraea of the Kitab or the Tav Eshret, right, is an older sister language of the Hebrew, the original ancient, very old Hebrew, or the Tav Ivri. Okay, that's what Victor and Alexander is saying, but this Andrew Gabriel Roth is pointing out that the Aramaic language is an older sister language of the Hebrew. So he'll be pointing out the Syriac is, right? Where we covered in the video that the high priest of this particular church, the same church, says the Syriac is wrong, because all originally came from the Lishana Atika Cypraea of the Tav Eshret. Okay. So we pointed out the Aramaic language is an older sister language of the Hebrew, a Semitic language of the Middle Eastern region of the world, which it is very close to in its construction, alphabet, and vocabulary. So you see, like, you know, the balance shifts. One will say, oh yeah, it's Aramaic is the older sister. The Hebrew followers will say, no. You know? Okay? And it says, which is very close to in its construction, alphabet, and vocabulary. So, us doing our personal research will say no to that, because if it's the original, ancient, very old language, Aramaic language, right, the Lishana Atika Cypraea of the Tav Eshret, right, sister language of that original, ancient, very old Tav Ivri, or the original, ancient, very old Hebrew, then they would have very close construction, alphabet, and vocabulary. But as we pointed out, they don't. Is the difference, right? Because one, originally they had their sister languages, right? They had the same words with the same meanings, but somewhere along the way, the Hebrew was modified. Maybe it's the Masoretes, okay, who started adding vowels and the dot system, all that sort of stuff, and nook dot, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's called. Right, which not only changed the structure of that language, but also changed the meaning of the words. And we've given this example lots of times about the word in the Brita, Yuma, which means immeasurable period, unfathomable period, eon, age, era, day with capital D, versus the Hebrew Yom, which is day, right? A literal 12-hour day, daylight, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of night, right? A literal day that we today understand, and a literal creation period of 6 days, and then a rest on the 7th day. Okay, so there's that vast difference here, because the words after that modification or that modernization that occurred not only changed the structure of that language, but changed the meaning of the words. So the Aramaic has these words like Yuma, the Yuma, right? The Hebrew has Yom, and they have two different meanings, right? So how could they have the same construction, right? No, they probably have the same construction, alphabet, and vocabulary, but they don't match, because that's modification, right? So the words have a different meaning, like Elohim, Elohim, versus the Hebrew Elohim, Elohim, Yom, yuma, yom, etc., etc. Okay. This is what people don't understand. Okay. Please note the Aramaic text is read from right to left like the Hebrew language. Okay, so that's a similarity, right? Interactive text. The English translation presented here on AramaicsScriptures.com can be verified in its reading when you click on the study tool, etc., etc., where you can examine the actual text itself to make sure all is as it should be in this translation. The study tool, hosted by Doctorates, will also allow you to look at each and every word in a number of Aramaic English dictionaries and lexicons where you can analyse each word for yourself in detail and thus learn more of the languages as you study. So that's what this is what Dr. James here says as well. He suggests go to that Ducana. Okay. Look at the Ducana, etc., etc. So they're both proponents of this Aramaic Peshitta, this Eastern Syriac Peshitta. Okay. There's more information on it. Transliteration. Unlike most other English translations of the Aramaic Scriptures, it was decided to make a very literal and faithful rendering into the English language, which is not only a translation of the Aramaic words into English words, which mean the same thing, but also to give the actual Aramaic words themselves in many places, as they read in the Aramaic language rendered in English letters, which is called transliterating. In this way, for persons, places, and things, which are the most often mentioned, you can become acquainted with the actual Aramaic words, or the Syriac words, which are used, and also see what they mean in the bracketed portion just following the original words or phrases. These transliterated words are phonetically rendered into English characters in a simple way as it could be done. This transliteration is thus a tool to help you learn the Aramaic language as you read through it. The English transliteration you are reading here is rendered straight from the Eastern Aramaic New Testament manuscripts. No Greek or Latin sources have been used, and no Western Peshitta readings have been used. He's done basically the same thing as Victor and Alexander. He's avoided all of those, the Vulgate, etc. Some Aramaic idioms are retained, while others which are not very understandable in English or which might alter the clear meaning of the text are rendered in a dynamic equivalent translation which gives the sense. Also, many other Aramaic English translations produced during the 19th to 21st centuries have been checked, consulted to see how they render the very difficult passages. Prayer for wisdom and awe, etc., etc. It is asked that anyone, blah 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 blah. It was begun, this translation to transliteration was, if it was begun in 2010, and so forth. Okay, and got the audio and all that sort of stuff. And seeking help for someone who can actually speak that language, and so forth. Right. Keep in mind that Andrew Gabriel Roth is actually a Messianic Jew, and at times he inserts the Greek, the Hebrew, right? Like he'll have, let's see an example here. Let's go to John's Gospel. Give you an example. Let me go there. Let's say, so look at John 1. Here's the Syriac font. In the beginning there was the Motha. He puts the Motha, not the Mota. The Word. Okay, there's more to the Word than the Word, right? And he, the Motha, the Word, was with Allah, God, and Allah himself was the Motha, the Word. He's not saying he's the manifestation. Okay? Very different from Victor Alexander's translation. Yeah, he was the manifestation, and God was the embodiment of that manifestation. Okay? You see slight differences, right? Yeah, he does sometimes refer to the Greek logos, etc. Logos is incorrect. So let's go to Mark's Gospel. Let's see if we can look at 16, something like that. So see how he translate that. 16, we'll go 15. I think it might be 1534. 1534, see if it'll go there. Okay. 1534. In the bottom here. See how he translates that compared to Victor and Alexander. Yeah, and in the Shain, the 9th hour, Yeshua cried out. So he's referring to the Hebrew here. It's not that bad. Cried out in a Ka ala Rama, a loud voice, and said, Il, Lamana, Shabachthani, which is Allahi, Lamana, Shabachthani, my God, why have you spared me? Okay, so he's given a different rendition here, whereas Victor N. Alexander's one is, wherefore have you left me, for what he's was destined to do, die on a cross, shed his blood, and it was for the remissions of sins, so man would have a way back to God, etc., right? Okay? And it definitely doesn't mean, my God, why have you forsaken me? Wherefore implies that destiny, right? Wherefore have you destined me? Why have you left me to that? Yeah. Destiny. Okay. What I'm destined to do, to have done, right? So there's differences there. Going back to this website, there was eventually, go back to home, there was a statement, he's taking it out, okay, where it said, a quote from the once head patriarch of the Church of the East, Isai Shamun, that the manuscripts given to this particular Church of the East from Thomas, or the disciples, from the blessed hands of the disciples, were hidden and preserved, basically for 2,000 years, hidden from the Roman Catholics. Constantine, who wanted to destroy them, the then Mohammedans, Islam, etc., for over 2,000 years, therefore they are preserved, right? And they remained intact. They were never messed with. And we found further, probably through Stephen Missick or something like that, Dr. Stephen Missick, that they had no need to translate it into any other foreign language, right? Or mess with it, right? All they did was read from that liturgy to their people in their mass or their church, who also spoke that language, understood that language. Okay? So it wasn't until Victor Alexander came along and he decided to translate it, and then he found, to his shock, that a lot of people that had previously tried to translate this Peshitta, etc., had botched it and messed it up. Okay? There's some testimonials from these people. Anyone can put testimonials on their site. Okay, so we have this man here, Dr. Stephen Missick.
Hello, I'm Dr. Missick, and I want to do a quick video answering the question, how do we know that Jesus spoke Aramaic? I recently looked at a video by Dr. David Wood, and a woman, an Assyrian woman, posted in the comment that, she's a Christian, Middle Eastern Christian, and she still speaks Aramaic, the language of Jesus Christ. And then someone else posted, well, I'm Greek, and the New Testament's written in Greek, and Jesus didn't speak Aramaic. And there are other people, especially like some Messianic Jewish teachers, who will say Jesus spoke Hebrew because Hebrew is the Jewish language and he didn't speak Aramaic. So you have people who speak Aramaic saying that they speak the language of Jesus Christ, and you have Greeks saying the New Testament's written in Greek, therefore Jesus spoke Greek, and that's it. And there's some New Testament scholars who study Greek who agree with that contention. And you have Jewish Christians saying, no, Hebrew is a Jewish language, and we believe that Hebrew is still spoken in the time of Jesus, therefore Jesus spoke Hebrew. So what's the answer? I'm going to get to the answer in the end, but the Greek New Testament states clearly that Jesus spoke Aramaic. So, the fact of the matter is the New Testament's written in Greek. Some people think there might have been, the Gospel of Matthew might have been written in Hebrew initially, but the Gospel of Matthew as we have it today was written in Greek. All four Gospels were written in Greek. If there's an Aramaic substratum, they're gone. We don't have any Aramaic manuscripts, and Paul wrote his epistles in Greek as well.
Okay, so he just made a statement that you don't have any of the original Aramaic manuscripts. Okay, well, the Church of the East says something different. They may have a 1st century, 4th, 5th century copy of those originals, or they may have that original. Okay, that's for you to and us to verify, right, if they do or not. Okay, so we think he's in error there because he doesn't know about Victor and Alexander's translations.
So I'm not denying the importance of Greek. And if you look at Hebrew with the Old Testament, over 95% of the Old Testament is written in Hebrew, and a very small percentage is written in Aramaic, the book of Daniel and parts of Ezra, but most of it's written in Hebrew. And at the time of Jesus, Hebrew was considered a prestige language. It was the language of the Old Testament, language of the Torah, so it's held in high regard. But people were speaking Aramaic. How do we know? First off, when Jesus is on the cross in Mark chapter 15, verse 34, he says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That's Aramaic. So it's Elahi, Elahi.
He's using the Syriac.
Elahi, lama sabachthani. That's pretty much standard, obvious Aramaic. If he's saying Hebrew, if he's speaking Hebrew, he would have said Eli, Eli, lama asbatani. I believe that's how you say it. I'm not an expert on Hebrew. But that is unquestionably in Aramaic. So when Jesus is on the cross, he's crying out, he's quoted in his original language saying, my God.
In fact, in Alexander's translation of that, he cries out, El, El. Not Elohi, Elohi, or whatever this guy's saying. He cries out, El, El. That's the name of God, right? The Mana Shrikhthani, or however it is in Victor in Alexander's translation of Luke 15:34, etc. And it's not, my God, why have you forsaken me? In no way is it that, right? It does say, my God, El, El, or Eloi, Eloi. That's correct, but the rest is incorrect, right? It's a second or third Arabic Greek translation, and it does not mean, my God, what, or why have you forsaken me? Okay, it means wherefore. Right? Implies the purpose that he was on the cross, right? His destiny. For he says, why, my God, why have you left me to what I was destined for? Right? We've done videos on it. So he's going to claim it says, my God, why have you forsaken me, which is incorrect. It's a second or third Arabic Greek transliteration.
Oh my God, why have you forsaken me? When somebody's in pain and agony, they usually revert to their mother tongue. Like when you stub your toe, if you study Latin or Greek or some other language, when you stub your toe, you're not going to be speaking that language, right? You're going to be speaking your mother tongue. So Jesus is on the cross, he's in agony, he's crying out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? There's a lot of reasons why Jesus said that. It refers to Psalm 22, which is a prophecy written hundreds of years before Jesus was born in the flesh, that prophesies of the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross.
Well, you have Rabbi Tovia Singer and his Jewish followers. They're cling to him to his every word. Right, he's the beloved rabbi who says, no, it's not a prophecy by Daniel of the Messiah, Jesus the Christ, or Yeshua, whatever. It's him crying out to God because he feels abandoned, left alone. God's not answering his prayers. So we did a video on that which shows Psalms 22 in English in the footnotes, translated by Victor and Alexander, underneath where he actually states it's a prophecy about the coming of the Christ, right? The Christ uttered that from Psalms 22, right? There's no prophecy there, right? But it's in relation to why did Christ yell that out on the cross, etc., etc. It was all pointing towards him, supposedly. And Isaiah 45:1, that there's no prophecy of, no mention of Christ, no prophecy, all that sort of stuff, when it's actually Allah, God, talking to his Messiah, the manifestation or the Mota, right? i.e. Jesus the Messiah, who was to come, right? God incarnated in the flesh, not Cyrus the king. He was just a tool used to free his people from the Babylonian exile, so they could go back to Jerusalem, build that temple, and go back to worshipping God the way He decided it, right? That they should. Okay, the correct way.
Plus, you have the idea that Jesus takes upon himself all the sins of the world, and so the Father looks away from the Son. That's what theologians believe. But here you have the anguish that Jesus was feeling, and he cried out, quoting Psalm 22, a prophetic psalm of the sufferings of Messiah. But that's what Jesus did. He said it while he's on the cross, in Aramaic. So, if this was some other language that Jesus didn't often speak, or as a foreign language to Jesus, why is he speaking? The Gospel of Mark, written in Greek, is quoting Jesus in this verse speaking in Aramaic. I mean, it's the holy word of God inspired by the apostles, and the apostle Mark is saying, or the evangelist Mark is saying that Jesus spoke Aramaic. And that verse and many other verses throughout the Gospel of Mark. When Jesus heals people, in the Gospel of Mark 5:41. So the cry from the cross, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, is Mark 15:34. You can look up these verses yourself. Mark 5:41 is Talitha kumai. That's Aramaic, or Talitha kum. Talitha means little girl, get up. That's what Jesus says to the daughter of Jairus, right? So that's Aramaic. So Jesus goes to a man's home to pray for his daughter to be healed. She passed away, so he speaks over, little girl, arise, little girl, get up. He says it in Aramaic. There's another place where Jesus says apophatha, when he heals a deaf man. And it's the same word in Hebrew and Aramaic, but it's a Semitic language, right? Why is Jesus using Aramaic? I mean, the logical explanation is it's written this way because the New Testament's written in Greek, but the native language of Jesus is Aramaic, right?
So in some, we're just thinking, well, at that time, if it's Aramaic and Hebrew, it's the same words, right? Then at that point in time, the sister languages, and there's no modification. So when did the Messianics come along and alter the structure of that language, or those languages, adding vowels, dot system, whatever, so that the words that were similar, had the same meaning. They were the same words that had the same meaning, suddenly become having the same words but different meanings in the Hebrew. Okay, how did that come about? So obviously, it sounds like in Jesus' days, Aramaic, Hebrew, Aramaic, they're basically the same language. Unless, like 15 Alexander says, he actually was speaking Galilean Aramaic, which is a derivative of, or from the original Aramaic, Ninevite Aramaic, that Jonah spoke when he visited the Asherai in Nineveh to warn them of the forthcoming wrath from God.
Nicknames. Cephas, or Kepha, is Peter is called Kepha in John 1:42. When he sees, this is when Peter meets Jesus the first time, Jesus says, "You are Simon, I will call you the rock," which is Kepha. In Greek, it's written in the Greek letters, Kepha, or Kephas, because you have the case endings where it ends with an S. But in Aramaic, it's Kepha, and it's used in the Gospel. Gospel of John's written in Greek, and yet the name, and Paul calls Peter Kepha, or Cephas, throughout the epistles whenever he refers to him, because he knew him personally, and Aramaic was the first language of Peter, and that was his name that he went by. It was given to him by Jesus. Why would Jesus give somebody a name in Aramaic that nobody's speaking? If everybody's speaking Greek or Hebrew, then why is Jesus giving this, his apostles names? And that's not just Peter or Kepha in Aramaic, but in Thomas is an Aramaic word which means twin. And in John 20:42 it says, and his disciple Thomas, which means the twin. So Peter has an Aramaic name. Thomas has an Aramaic name. You also have Bartholomew. Bar in Aramaic means son of. Barabbas in Matthew 27:26.
Yeah, and he goes on, carries on. Yeah, because they were Galilean fishermen. That was their trade, and that's all they really knew. It's all about surviving. Feeding the people, right? So, they might have been illiterate, etc., not privileged to be scribes, writers, learn writing system, whatever, right? And write things down. So maybe somebody amongst them who was educated, who knew how to write, probably a tax collector or something like that, like Matthew, whatever, that knew numbers and writing, could have put all down, what Jesus said and what he did. All right. could have done that. Could have wrote it all down. Okay. So they're basically illiterate according to D. Ehrman, because he went to that area where they supposedly had lived, survived or whatever, and he said there's no like graffiti or anything or writings around on walls or anything like that that indicate that they were literate. And so you've got to be really careful. You really got to do your homework, do your personal research. Don't take these guys as the one, the only, because they can unbeknowingly or unwillingly take you down a wrong path. Okay, so yeah, he's pretty onto it. We forgot to mention before that the Aramaic Scriptures, we left out, we took out that statement by the former patriarch in 1957, Isai Shamun. Right, you can find it in one of his books about the Peshitta. That's Andrew Gabriel Roth. It's included in there. We have a copy of that. We've already done a video on it which showed it, so we're not going to cover it here, but yeah, take a word for it. That's in one of his translations of the Syriac Peshitta. Okay, so back to this man. Where are we? Okay, and what's this in Syriac New Testament?
Jesus was an Aramaic-speaking Jew of the Middle East, and the Assyrians are Aramaic-speaking Christians in the Middle East who have endured persecution for over 1,000 years. Join Voice of the Word.
We read it was 2,000 years. Right? 18 centuries, is it anywhere near 2,000 years? They got persecution from, because it was started with Nestorius having a debate with Cyril, a Roman Catholic. The hypostasis, Nestorius saying that Christ was of two substances, two natures, God or divine and human. Cyril, he wanted to be the bishop of all bishops, and he thought, he realised that Nestorius would be, right, and he wouldn't be, so he got all jealous, right, and he started lying and all that sort of stuff, and then Nestorius gets called a heretic, and persecution started, all that sort of stuff. And then this Church of the East, who later on said, yeah, we were saying that the hypostasis, that Christ has two substances, two natures, both God, divine, and man, right? So they got persecution from Roman Catholic Church, etc., because they agreed with what Nestorius said, but they said, well, we've been saying that thousands of years before he uttered it, right? So they got 18 centuries or 2,000 years of persecution, right? Yeah. From the Roman Catholics, the Protestants, Roman Catholics, Constantine, under Constantine, probably the Protestants, Genghis Khan and the Mongols, the Kurds, ISIS, probably Al Qaeda, getting all that crap thrown at them today. They blew up all their ancient Assyrian artifacts, etc., right? Drills and hammers and all this sort of stuff, and they boasted about it on some video or something like that. Just news coverage. They did all that stuff, and they said it was all religious purposes, but it's like rubbish. They want to wipe it out, so there's no trace of it, right? And it was considered a war crime by this faction. Okay, so apparently the Assyrian guards or force or something like that is like guarding it, protecting it, whatever's left, but they don't think they'll ever repair that stuff. But somebody made a 3D image of it or something like that. Yeah, we did a video on that, we believe. Added that. Yeah, so we'll carry on with this guy.
Aramaic Bible teacher, artist, and author Stephen Missick, as he examines the Bible through the
English New Testament, edited by
Voice of the Word.
Hello, this is Dr. Missick. I want to welcome you to this edition of Voice of the Word. And today, I want to talk about an important new publication, which I have right here. And it is the Syriac English New Testament, edited by George A. Carraz, which represents the traditional Syriac Peshitta text and the Antioch Bible English translation. So let's open up and take a look at it. So let's take a look right here. We can see the Syriac text right here. And here we have the English translation. First off, what is Syriac? Now, the text of the New Testament is written in Greek, but there are many Aramaic words scattered throughout the Greek text. What is Aramaic? It's a Semitic language. It's closely related to Hebrew, and it's one of the 3 original languages of the Bible. Several parts of the book of Ezra and a large section of the book of Daniel are written in Aramaic, and this includes some Bible stories that most people are familiar with. The story of Daniel in the lion's den, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the Son of Man prophecy of the coming cosmic Messiah, which is probably alluded to by Jesus Christ many times when he called himself the Son of Man, which is Barnasha or Barnasha in Aramaic.
And he continues. We're just going to go our notes, cut that down. Stephen Missick, the Syriac NT English translation, the Syriac English, edited by George A. Carraz. What is Syriac? Many Aramaic words scattered throughout the Greek text, as he said. Right. Aramaic, a Semitic language closely related to Hebrew, very similar to but not identical with the Aramaic spoken by Jesus the Christ, because he spoke Galilean Aramaic. Why? Yeah, as he spoke Galilean Aramaic, not Syriac. Okay, what's this say? 01, 55 to 258. Okay, that's basically in that video. You can go back to the original Aramaic, but we put not if you don't have it, the original ancient, very old language that Yeshua Mashiach or Jesus, Yeshua Mashiach or Jesus the Messiah spoke, that which was hidden by the ancient church, the very old ancient church of the East. It was told Victor N. Alexander, the native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Bet Nahrein or Mesopotamia in Syria, that the Syriac wasn't the original. As the Syriac was wrong, it's translated from the Greek into the Syriac, as we mentioned earlier, we think. And he mentions J.W. Etheridge, Steve Verlich, Parallel NT, Lama, Murdoch, and others. Yeah, there'll be J.W., Murdoch, and Lamsa. Introduction to the PH.d committee, claiming then apparently the KJV. Let's do some glasses here. Yeah, he's talking about the introduction of the KJV, which we already covered in different videos. Bible committee claiming they consulted the original ancient Aramaic, Hebrew, Syriac, Peshitta. Okay, when they didn't, right, they can't have, because they're old dead languages. If they were the original ancient, very old tongue or languages. And he says George Lamsa associated with fringe groups, universalists, Unitarians, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so you'd have to look at the Syrian Orthodox Church. Okay, and they use there's 3 different types of Aramaic. There's the Extranglo, which is the most common one. Eastern script, that's Jacobite, that's the Church of the East, and Circa, I think he said, script. Okay. We already looked at Dr. James Franco. Dr. James D. Fransisco. Okay. So, hopefully we have covered all of our notes, and if you find this, what we think now is probably a 4-hour video, that's opened your eyes to these 3 or 4 different translators who make various claims, who may be incorrect in many ways, as we have shown by asking them questions, right, getting the replies back, and then relaying them to you, where you can pick up, okay, what you've asked them is true, so they're very truthful, or what you've asked them in a comment is false, like they're saying one thing in the video and then they're denying it in the comment, right? You know, they've got it wrong or something like that. They're all like modern Syriac Peshitta attached, right? Or Hebrew attached, or Greek attached, or Syriac attached, or whatever, right? Get it? That's what they're promoting, that's what they're pushing, okay? That's their motive, because that's what they've come to, you know, they've read it, studied it, they've got some qualifications in that, and are putting it across. But unlike Victor N. Alexander over here, they don't have that original manuscripts, okay, from that original language spoken by Jesus the Christ, or the Old Testament prophets like Moses, etc. The Lishana Atika, the sacred scribal tongue, old tongue or language of the Kitab Ashret or Tav Ashret, right? Or the Tav Ivri, even the Tav Hotep, which we think might be what Moses learnt while in Egypt, right? In the court of the Pharaoh, as his adopted son. Okay, we haven't come across that one yet, but Hotep sounds very Egyptian, right? So what we're basically doing through this really long video is trying to waken up the people, awake all you people to these supposed experts, okay? They have doctorates, all that sort of stuff, but you know, when you sort of go for your doctorate, you got to get your masters, and your get your degree first, don't you? And then your masters, you go for your PH.d. So you have to bring something new, don't you? And it has to be honest, and then you get awarded by some institution or whatever, this PH.d. You know, so you're telling the truth up until then, bringing something new, but then after that you can totally lie, right? Yeah, fabricate things. Okay, so we are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and we hope that you enjoyed this. Don't know how long this is. We'll say it's about 3 hours long. Might cut it into chunks. This video, if you do, give us a like, a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, add your comments down below, and then share this particular video with all your family, friends, church friends, Jewish friends, Islamic friends, and others.